So while recording episode 3 of the Combat Kings podcast, go subscribe if you've not, the subject of JoJo came up briefly, and I remembered that I wanted to make a tier list of my personal rankings for each JoJo part as I've seen them so far. So I started looking for a tier list for the JoJo part, and the only one I found that actually was for the JoJo part and is complete is this one, ranking JoJo parts based on how gay they are by Bumpsick. Yeah, this is what I'm going to be using for this episode. I could have changed the titles, but I think it's funnier this way. So basically, I'm going to be kind of taking you through my JoJo history experience, a golden experience, if you will. So clever. We'll go chronologically. So I started watching JoJo, it was while Stardust Crusaders was the most recent anime thing, so I watched Phantom Blood and Battle Tendency dubbed. I watched JoJo dubbed. I did watch a bit of it subbed, but we'll get to that. So I watched Phantom Blood with the terrible English accents by Johnny Young Bosch and Patrick Sykes. That was fun. So these rankings are like S, A, B, C, D. I'd say this is a C, Phantom Blood. It's incredibly unremarkable. Like, if JoJo had stopped here, or if Battle Tendency had been a completely new thing that was disconnected from this, no one would remember JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, unless maybe it was like a bit of trivia, like mega fans of whatever Araki came up with later would know about. They'd be like, oh, Araki had this other series just before that, it wasn't much of a success, but people would still bump it up because it's connected to this other thing they like, so they'd be like, oh, it's by the same creator. Clearly it's really good, and it's like, no, it's not an underrated gem, it's very bland, and I can't imagine, even for the time, that it was at all remarkable. It's just okay. Like, it's not bad or anything, it's just so unremarkable that it's barely even worth bringing up. So then we move on to Battle Tendency. Now, Battle Tendency, I'd probably give it an A. Some of this might change, but I'd probably give it an A. I think it was a step up. It wasn't incredible. I never found any JoJo part to be incredible the way a lot of people do, but I think it was definitely a huge improvement over what had come before. Joseph is a much more charismatic and fun protagonist. We even have like a Nazi character that is actually likable. Like, what? How do you do that? Somehow von Stroheim is one of the best characters. he's a cyborg Nazi. It's great. And then it's like, oh, at the end the narrator's like, and then Stroheim went off and died in the Battle of Stalingrad, and it's like, no, von Stroheim, please. Yeah, like, it's weird how he can be sad for a literal Nazi, but I guess that shows how well written he was. Though I do think the Pillarmen were some of the most boring villains JoJo's ever had. Like, yeah, they're the most boring, I would say. Not necessarily the worst, because I really have never cared for Dio, and that's the controversial take of the day. I think Dio is a bad villain. Or at the very least, he's incredibly overhyped and overrated, and I'm sick of him being relevant to every single part except for part 2. It's one of the things that makes part 2 better, actually, is the fact that Dio has fuck all to do with it. He's not a major part of the story, he's not just some tenuous connection that doesn't fucking matter. Part 5, he's just not relevant at all. And so a Dio-less JoJo is a better JoJo. And I don't care if you disagree, you're wrong, fuck you. In a similar vein of, I don't care if you disagree, you're wrong, fuck you, Stardust Crusaders is trash. I hate Stardust Crusaders. It's the only one that I genuinely dislike. Stardust Crusaders is way too long. It's just unnecessarily lengthy. I don't know why it takes as long to get through as it does. It doesn't have a particularly interesting premise. Bringing back Dio seems like it could be interesting, but then he doesn't really do anything until the end, and then Jotaro, the big fight, everyone bums up. Yeah, Jotaro just has to pull the same power Dio has out of his ass, because otherwise there is literally no way he could have won, because Dio's power is too great. So basically, when I was watching part 1 and 2, Stardust Crusaders wasn't dubbed yet, so I decided to watch that subbed. Like that, I got to... It was the Fate Kakyoin episode with a little, oh, as the dub puts it, lick. And so I stopped watching after that because I just didn't care for it. It was like, the dog melt. You don't melt a dog. That's bullshit. Fuck you. And I just didn't care for it. I didn't care for what the story was about. I didn't care for the characters that much. It was just kind of dull. So I stopped watching it. Then sometime later I came back to watch the dub. because by then it was being dubbed. Because when I got it dubbed, I can just have it on second monitor and do other stuff. Like, I can still work on videos while I'm watching a dub, but with a sub, I have to actually take time out of my day to sit there for 20 minutes and do nothing else. And so I thought, you know, maybe more passive experience will help me get through this quicker. And I got to the end of season 1, got to the start of season 2. I'll watch one episode of season 2 of Stardust Crusaders, and that's what made me realise I just can't do this anymore. I actually quit watching JoJo entirely for a bit because I thought I don't want to watch another full season of this crap. And, you know, it was bullshit when they all just lied to Polnareff and said, oh yeah, you know that guy who you feel died for your sake? He's alive. They didn't tell him. They just kept it secret from him only. He's the only one who didn't know. And that's just fucking villainous. That's what bad people do. And then Polnareff's whole thing with Iggy was just never funny. I never cared for any of those antics. I don't like Iggy. He's just an annoying piece of shit. And so what I did was I was like, okay, part 4 has been dubbed. I'll give that one a go. So I looked up when the Dio fight starts, skipped to that, and just watched the Dio fight. So I missed the Vanilla Ice fight, but I probably wouldn't be able to take it seriously anyway, because the idea of taking a scene seriously where Polnareff says, I'm sorry, Mr. Joestar, Avdol and Iggy were killed by Vanilla Ice, I can't take that seriously. If you claim you can, you are a liar. I missed that fight, I watched the Dio fight, and yeah, it was crap. This was the issue that I had with JoJo up to this point was, it was just this constant stream of, okay, this is a thing people love, it's really hyped up, people think it's amazing, and so start watching it, it's very unremarkable in part 1. And then I think, okay, well, maybe it'll pick up with the stands. I didn't know much about the meme, so I didn't really think that maybe JoJo will make it a lot better, although he admittedly did. So I thought, okay, well, the stands, that's where it gets better, right? So then I started watching Stardust Crusaders, and I was like, this is just not good. And then I remember telling some people about it, and they said, no, it's part 4 where it gets really good. And it's like, how far into this show do I need to watch until it gets like genuinely enjoyable, to where it's something I would want to watch multiple times? Something that lives up to the hype that people have built up around this franchise. And then it kind of turns out that Damn Near's Unbreakable is the best part of JoJo, hands down. It's nothing spectacular, but it's at least something I would consider watching again. It's the only part of JoJo I would look at and go, yeah, I'd probably watch that again. It's got some fun characters. I mean, there's stuff I don't like about it, obviously, but it has some fun characters. The power stuff isn't quite as bullshit a lot of the time as it was in part 3, you know, where it's like, people like, you know, that's another thing is people just like, oh yeah, JoJo's such a smart show. The characters have to be have to use tactics and stuff to win. There's none of that power creep bullshit you see in like Dragon Ball Z, and it's like, okay, Starfinger and Jotaro having the world. Fuck you. You're a liar. So part 4 is easily the best part. I would watch that again. I'm not in a rush to, but I can imagine in a few years' time I'd be like, you know, I'll give it another go. It's not as long as Stardust Crusaders. It's not got like one goal that just takes forever to get to. It's kind of like split into smaller arcs, which I think works better. Because Stardust Crusaders is divided into the crew are on their way to Cairo to complete their mission, and they are in Cairo trying to complete their mission. That's kind of it. Whereas here it's smaller arcs with smaller goals that eventually all lead up to the big thing. I mean, admittedly, the actual fight with Kira, I had this realization recently that I can't think of a single JoJo like final fight that I really care for. I mean, I barely remember most of any of these fights. None of them really stand out. And the resolution was, while funny, also a bit lame. The bad guy gets run over by an ambulance by accident. Not even like by someone who has been wronged by him. You know, it's a serial killer. Maybe he killed a loved one of this driver who recognized him and ran him over or something like that. Or, you know, it's just a total coincidence, just pure chance. Which, I guess Kira was already defeated by that point, so it's not, people don't view it as like a Deus Ex Machina, but it kind of is. The villain just gets his head crushed by an ambulance by accident, out of nowhere. It's not that great a conclusion, but it's a good part, and while it's not on here, unfortunately, if I was to rank Kishibe Rohan, that thing, I watched one episode of that, and I was like, this is kind of lame. It's a spin-off for Rohan, a character I don't even really care for, and he's barely in it. He's just telling the story that someone else told him. I was like, well, that's weird. So I thought, well, let's see where this goes. And the next episode starts up, and it's like, oh, it's a completely separate story. So it's just a horror anthology that's just got Rohan as a framing device. That's it. I was like, that's fucking lame. In the first part, it didn't grip me at all, and then thought it's going to be completely unrelated stories, and the only connection to JoJo is that Rohan is the one telling them. I have no interest in this. It also didn't help that because I watched it dubbed. This was after the whole Kick Vic thing, so Vic Mignogna is not Rohan. So it feels even less connected to JoJo when the main character has been recast from the thing he's spun off from. So I just don't care for it. Then we have Golden Wind. yeah, it's like the average JoJo series for me. It's fine. I mean, there's weird shit in it, like Fugo just fucking up and disappears like a third of the way into the show, just for no reason. I think he actually gets to show up in the fighting games, whereas like one of the characters who does stick around, he doesn't. It's just kind of weird. So now we come to Stone Ocean. Now, Stone Ocean, in a world of logic, this would have been completed by now. But we live in a world where Netflix, for some reason, has full control over its release and decided that, yeah, we'll release like 12 episodes and then we'll release the next 12 a year later. It led to this thing where when they start recapping bits from the previous season at the start of the second batch of episodes, and I was like, wow, for binging the whole thing, this must be terrible. But at the same time, this is necessary because I don't fucking remember a lot of what happened. Honestly, the intro did a better job, I think, of summarising it, because the OP just goes through that first batch of episodes, basically gives you, and like watching that, I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that bit and that bit and that bit. Good, but why is there no new OP for batch 2? Was that a Netflix decision too? Did they want to have a consistent opening? Fuck off, Netflix. I'm glad your company's burning to the ground. But the point is, I can't really rank Stone Ocean because it's not finished yet. I can't reasonably put this in the ranking as like a firm thing and say this is better than the others, because so far I am enjoying it more than Golden Wind. But it's entirely possible that it'll completely shit the bed during the next batch of episodes. So all I can really say about it is it's quite good. It has a more interesting setup to me, because you get right down to it, this is kind of the same kind of setup in part 5 as part 3 had. A bunch of cool dudes are going to go to fight an evil bad guy in some location, and they're going to go beat him up. Whereas here it's get out of prison. Deal with stand users in prison and get out. Which also, amusingly, it does have some shades of Stardust Crusaders, because in this one, Jolene is trying to save her father from an evil bad guy's evil power that relates to Dio. It's just that it's easy to get invested in it because this is Jotaro and not Holly, who had been in like 1 episode or 2. And Jotaro is like, the main character of an entire part, and then was a supporting character throughout another part. Him being the one whose life is on the line inherently makes it more interesting than a character who had never appeared before. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's how I'd rank it. I'd say Damaged Unbreakable is the best, followed by Battle Tendency, tentatively Stone Ocean, but it could shit the bed. It might even end up being better than part 2. I don't know. Probably not, but it's at least pretty good. And then you have Golden Wind, followed by Phantom Blood, and finally Stardust Crusaders. I know a lot of people probably put Stardust Crusaders like up here. I feel like most JoJo fans would be like, oh, part 1 is the worst, and then like 6 and 5 would come next, and then up here you have like part 2, mainly because you have all the memes and a really fun protagonist, and then above that you would have like parts 3 and 4 in either order. But I just do not like Stardust Crusaders. Now, I'm gonna have a bit of fun here and start ranking the protagonists, just for fun, since there's no point making a dedicated video. So first off, I might have said this before, but yeah, my favourite character in the series is Joseph. And this is actually a fun thing, is when the JoJo Pose art that Sonic RxD commissioned of the two of us, Brusque Poet and True Underdog Gaming, when that was commissioned, he asked us who our favourite JoJo characters were. And I believe Dog and I'm not sure about Brusque, but at least Dog and I both answered Joseph. And so that's why I was given the Dio pose, because because it's like, well, one of us can be Joseph, one of us will be someone else, and then I was the one who was given Dio, which is kind of funny because seeing how I don't like Dio. I think he's overrated as fuck, and the series is best when it's not going back to that well. The only time I think bringing Dio back was any good at all is in part 6, because honestly, the implications of him and his big gay relationship with Poochie is the most characterization Dio has ever gotten. Like, it's the most depth he's ever had, where it's not just, the generic evil foster kid who kicks a dog the second he sees it for no reason. Dio is not a good villain, and that's why I'm kind of dreading what part 7 does, where it has like 2 of him or something in like the alternate universe. So theoretically part 8 could be even better. I don't know what happens in part 7. Don't spoil me or you will be blocked. So back to the protagonists. Jonathan is very uninteresting. It's just like his part, he's kind of bland. It's one of the things that makes Joseph so good, is that he's such a step up from Jonathan. Jonathan's not a bad protagonist, he's just thoroughly unremarkable and kind of representative of his entire part, to be honest. The best thing that Araki ever did was kill off Jonathan and do a time skip to introduce his grandson. Because once he did that, all of a sudden the series had so many more opportunities to do stuff. And I'm hoping that your boy Johnny Joestar, I don't know which one of these part 7, which is part 8, but hopefully Johnny Joestar will be an improvement. I'm hoping for that. Josuke is fine. I feel like he, in terms of personality, is one of the weaker members of his cast. Not bad by any means, but I never really cared much for his personality. Not really anything about him that stands out. In a way, I'd say that he and Jonathan are kind of representations of what the average protagonist is like in manga for their times. Where Jonathan has a very basic personality, and he's basically just kind of a goody two-shoes who just go in and beats up the bad guys without too much of an issue. And then you have Josuke, who, power of friendship. Like, I'm going to befriend my enemies, make them into my friends, and then we're going to beat up the bad guys as a crew. So let's wrap this up with these 3 protagonists. So Jono is also just kind of fine. I feel like him being Dio's son was it's just there to justify him being connected to the Joestars without giving Joseph like another secret son or like aging Jotaro up the way part 6 did. I just don't find that interesting. I like Josuke a bit more, but not by a whole lot. Jolene is a bit more interesting. Personality-wise, there are definite shades of her dad, although she's less of a twat, clearly. So I'd put her probably here as my second favourite protagonist. It also helps that just by virtue of being a girl, she is different from the others. Not like being a girl is like a huge part of her character, although her being in prison inherently means that most of the people she comes across are going to be other women, so that also inherently changes the part itself. But it does make her stand out from the others, and I think effectively being Jotaro, but like with a bit more character to her. In a way, she's kind of like a fusion of Josuke and Jotaro, which is kind of amusing. Yeah, I think she is one of the better protagonists. Not a match for Joseph. I don't think Joseph's ever going to be topped. I'm hoping that part 7 and 8 will prove me wrong. Hopefully, Johnny and Josuke 8 will be really cool characters, and I believe Araki's at least prepping for part 9, or has just started it somewhat recently. So I guess we'll see what that protagonist is like. But yeah, that's all the JoJo parts and protagonists ranked. Oh, I guess, no. Sorry, I missed one. So, if I were to pick a position, I would have to say that probably just slightly above Jonathan. Just a bit, not a whole lot, but just a bit above Jonathan is where I would place Kishibe Rohan. Because again, I don't really care for that character, but he at least has some quirks that make him stand out from Jonathan, but I don't really care for him as a protagonist. I never cared for him as a character in the first place, so making him a protagonist is kind of weird. I feel like the spin-off I'm most interested in is that I think there's a novel about Fugo after the events of part 5, and I think that's a way more interesting direction to go. If they want to do another OVA thing, that'd be a good direction to go. Like, it'd be cool if they were productions like between major parts, in like the year or 2 in between parts. It'd be really cool if they could just do like an OVA based on one of the spin-offs, one of the spin-off mangas or novels or what have you, and just adapt that. Then you make it like 2 to 4 episodes, and just got this fun little extra thing. I think that would be a good thing for them to do. And, so then we could have Fugo on here, and Fugo wouldn't be much higher, but, he'd be higher than Rohan, and that's what matters. So with that, I'm going to leave it here. That is my JoJo rankings for the parts and for the protagonists. And, okay, to be fair, I was mostly thinking of Stardust Crusaders Jotaro when I was thinking, haha, don't mention it, just leave him, just pretend that's it. But he's not that bad when you move on to the subsequent appearances where he's taking more of the mentor role, because once he's in that, he's actually pretty good. Now I'm thinking about it. As a protagonist, yes, I'd leave him down here because I really don't like his character. He's just kind of a dick for no reason. But as a character, once you move on to the other parts, I would rank him above Jono for sure, possibly above Josuke. Again, I think he's overhyped. I think that Jotaro is overdone at this point in the series. I would have preferred other characters to make return appearances. But yeah, I'd probably put him somewhere around Josuke as far as ranking him as a character once he's moved out of the protagonist role and is a supporting character for other people's stories. He's the kind of character who I feel works better in that capacity than as a protagonist. And so that's my ranking of JoJo. It's objectively correct. If you disagree, you are an idiot, you are wrong, you have bad taste, and you're also probably some kind of, how do I put this, some kind of soy boy cuck. I think that's the right terminology for the kind of person who thinks that part 3 is the best, or that Jotaro is the best protagonist. Like that. That's the kind of person you don't want to meet down a dark alley. They'll probably flash their flaccid penis at you. Fuck you.